My mother called, chuckling. Your sister spent your college fund to reserve her dream wedding in Italy. You weren't going to use it anyway. I kept silent, then made a single call. Cancel everything tied to that name, I told the agent. They paused and asked, sorry, who are you? I grinned and said, I'm the person who paid for the entire estate they're celebrating at. Do you know what it feels like to have your entire world ripped out from under you, brick by agonizing brick? And then, just when you think you're rebuilding, to have your own family try to throw a lavish party on its ruins? Because my mother's giddy laughter over the phone was the sound of a betrayal so profound, it felt like a punch to the gut. It taught me that some people won't just take everything you give, they'll laugh while they steal the rest, then pretend you owe them. My story, the real one, started years ago, back when I was just a kid in high school and life felt simpler. I was Owen. The quiet one, the responsible one. Not the golden child, though. That was always Elise, my sister, 3 years older. She just radiated this blonde, effortless charm. Everyone loved her. Parents adored her. Teachers doted. Even strangers would smile at her like she was destined for greatness. Me? I was the one fixing the Wi-Fi, helping Dad with his taxes. Just useful. I didn't resent her at first, not really. She was my big sister. She taught me to ride my bike, braided string bracelets for me at camp, even let me tag along with her friends sometimes. But as we got older, something shifted. The rules changed. Elise crashed Dad's car in high school, blamed it on a phantom dog. Zero punishment. When I aced calculus with an A+, Mom gave me a half-hour lecture on not applying myself enough. Later, Elise dropped out of college after her first semester. The family rallied, threw her a mental health weekend at the lake house. But when I got into 3 colleges on scholarship, I was told I could always go later, maybe take a gap year to save money and help the family. I never ended up going. It wasn't one big, dramatic choice that changed everything. It was 1,000 tiny ones, each a whisper of obligation that grew into an irreversible current. I took a part-time job, then a second, a night shift at a hotel. I started picking up the slack at home, water bills, Elisa's phone upgrade, handing Mom cash until Friday more times than I could count. I told myself I was being a good son, a good brother. That I was useful. Then, finally, something clicked for me. Real estate photography. I was good with tech, had a decent eye. I bought a used DSLR, practiced every weekend, built a portfolio. Slowly, it snowballed. By 23, I was running my own small agency. Nothing huge, but it was enough to finally move out. I rented a tiny apartment across town, bought a used car that didn't need prayer to start in winter. It felt good. It felt earned. But the calls from my family? They didn't stop. They intensified. Owen, the fridge just died, and your father's back is acting up. Can you swing by with some cash? Elise is trying to finish her degree online. Could you help with her tuition? Just for a semester until she's back on her feet. You're not using that savings account, are you, honey? It's just sitting there. I'd say yes, almost always. And when I didn't, the guilt would roll in, hard and fast. Elise once sent me a string of texts that started with, wow, I guess I know where I stand, and ended with, thanks for nothing. Mom would follow up with voicemails about how family sticks together and how you wouldn't even have money if we hadn't supported you growing up. There was one thing, though, that I never touched. My college fund. It wasn't huge, but it had been growing since I was 12. My Aunt Na had set it up after Uncle Carl passed, a chunk of inheritance in a trust specifically for my education. It was airtight. Couldn't be accessed for anything else, not even by my parents. I checked it every few months, just to remind myself it was there. A backup plan. A safety net in a world where my family only seemed to see me as one. I hadn't decided what to do with it yet. Maybe online school, maybe let it sit until I started my own real estate development firm. Just knowing it was there gave me a sense of control, of independence. And then came that call. I remember it down to the second. Mid-afternoon sun through the blinds. A half-empty takeout container on my coffee table. My phone lit up. Mom. I almost let it go to voicemail. God, I wish I had. She was laughing. Full-on giggling, like she'd just watched a comedy special. Oh, honey, she said, catching her breath. You're going to love this. Elise finally did it. She booked the villa in Italy for the wedding. The whole thing catered. Oceanside. It's stunning. I blinked. Wait, what villa? You know, the estate I showed you last month. The one in Tuscany with the lavender fields. Oh, she's been dreaming about it for years. And guess what? We made it happen. We? I asked, my voice suddenly dry, almost a whisper. Oh, I mean, well, your sister did most of the planning. But listen, don't be mad, okay? She paused, and then the words dropped like a brick. She used your college fund. The silence that followed was a vacuum in my chest. I didn't respond. I physically couldn't. My mind was scrambling, trying to make sense of what she'd just said. That airtight fund. That money I'd kept untouched through everything. That one piece of my future I thought was mine. You weren't using it anyway, she said with a shrug I could practically hear through the phone. And family comes first, right? Besides, you've got that business now. You're doing fine. I must have been quiet for too long, because she cleared her throat. Owen? I swallowed. Did she even ask me? Another laugh, smaller this time. Oh, don't be so dramatic. She's your sister. I ended the call without another word. My fingers trembled as I opened my laptop and logged into the trust portal. Access denied. Unauthorized changes. A new beneficiary listed. Somehow, someone had found a loophole. And that's when it truly hit me. My name wasn't even on the wedding guest list. I hadn't received a save the date. No texts. Nothing. They planned to do all of this behind my back. I stood up, walked to the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. My hands were shaking too much to drink it. The betrayal hit like a slow-moving wave. Not the kind that knocks you over immediately. The kind that pulls at your feet until the ground is gone. I sat back down, pulled up my files, and opened the ledger of properties and businesses I'd quietly invested in over the past 2 years. It wasn't flashy. I didn't talk about it. But while they were busy treating me like a walking ATM, I'd been turning my income into something more. I scrolled down, stopping at the line that read, Villa de Lanma, Tuscany Estate, acquired via holding company, Canera Group. My name wasn't listed on any public record, but I owned it. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen as 100 thoughts collided in my head. Rage. Grief. Disbelief. And then, something colder. Sharper. They thought they'd stolen my future, but they just tried to book their dream wedding at a place I already owned. And the reservation? It was still pending final confirmation. My hand reached for the phone. I had one call to make. I stared at my phone for a long moment, then tapped the screen. The dial tone rang once, twice, then connected. Villa de Lanma, how may I assist you? The voice on the other end was crisp, polite, professional. I cleared my throat. Hi, I need to cancel a reservation. It was made under the name Elise Waverly. There was a short pause, then a rustling of paper. Just one moment, sir. I could hear her clicking through something. Yes, we have a full estate reservation under that name. June 14th through June 21st, full access to the vineyard, spa, catering staff, private chef, and garden ceremony area. Deposit received. May I ask the reason for cancellation? I'm the owner, I said, simply. She didn't have my permission to book it. Another pause. Sharper now. I'm sorry. You are Owen Waverley, Canara Group? My holding company acquired the estate last year. You should have a non-disclosure on file regarding private ownership. A different kind of silence followed this time. Not confusion. Realization. I see. Yes, I do see that here. She sounded nervous. Now, would you like me to proceed with the cancellation? Not yet, I replied. I'll call back soon. I want everything untouched until I say otherwise. I ended the call before she could ask more questions. My hands were still shaking, but not from shock anymore. It was something else now. Something sharper. Angrier. I didn't feel like the quiet, dependable one anymore. I felt like the fool who had been used too many times. And suddenly, I wasn't okay with that anymore. The very next day, I drove to my parents' house, unannounced. It was still the same modest split level I'd grown up in. Same cracked driveway, same creaky porch swing. I hadn't been back in over a year. Dad opened the door, his face tightening when he saw me. Owen, didn't know you were coming. I figured, I said, stepping past him without waiting. Mom was in the kitchen, sipping coffee and humming. Elise was on the couch, scrolling through her phone, a glass of wine in hand, at 11 a.m. Elise, I said flatly. She looked up, her eyes briefly flicking with surprise before settling into a smug little smile. Well, look who finally decided to show his face. I didn't get an invite, I replied. Mom laughed from behind me. Oh, honey, you know how tight the guest list is. Elisa's fiancé's family is flying in from everywhere. There just wasn't space. But you'll be with us in spirit, right? I ignored the burn in my chest. So, you're going to Italy next month? Elise raised her glass. Tuscany, baby. Ceremony in the garden. Dinner under the stars. Fireworks over the vineyard. It's going to be magical. And you used my college fund. Elise didn't even flinch. She just rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic. You weren't going to use it. You're not even in school. I'm starting a life, Owen. A real one. I turned to Mom. How did you even get access to it? She smiled like she was explaining something obvious to a child. We spoke with a trustee. We told them you were allowing it, that you'd given verbal permission. I didn't. But you weren't using it, she said again, this time with a little more edge. And Elise needed it. This wedding is important to her. She deserves something special after everything. Elise dropped out of college twice. I said, my voice rising. She's never held a job for more than 6 months. She maxed out 3 credit cards last year and had you bail her out. I've worked since I was 16. Paid your bills. Paid her bills. And the one thing that was mine, you just gave it to her. You need to calm down. Mom snapped. You always make everything about you. You think money is the only thing that matters? Elise is starting a family. That's what matters. I laughed then, bitter and hollow. I guess I know where I stand. Dad finally spoke, his arms crossed from the doorway. You've always been the practical one, Owen. The steady one. You'll be fine. The steady one. Like I was the emotional pack mule for the family. The responsible one who didn't need help because I was too useful being everyone else's fallback plan. I left before I said something I couldn't take back. But as I walked to my car, Elisa's voice followed me from the front steps. "Hey, just make sure you don't ruin this for me, okay? This wedding is my dream." She said it like I owed it to her. Like she deserved it. Like I was the unreasonable one for being upset that my own sister had robbed me, with my parents' help. Over the next few days, the calls and texts started pouring in. Elise wanted help with dress fittings and flights. Mom sent me photos of invitation designs and asked if I'd at least contribute to the floral arrangements since it's still a family event. Dad texted me, asking if I could help Elisa's fiancé find a photographer for cheap since you're in that business. No one apologized. No one even acknowledged what they'd done. It was like they'd already rewritten the story in their heads. Elise planned a magical wedding, and Owen's being dramatic again. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up the property records for the Tuscan estate. I reviewed the fine print on event contracts. I called the coordinator in Italy and confirmed every reservation detail. And then I looked at the financials. Because here's the thing, no one in my family knew. I didn't just buy the estate. I owned the entire holding company that managed it. The staff, the vendors, the contracts, everything. For a while, I sat there staring at the screen, thinking about how easy it would be to end it all with one email, one call. Cancel the whole thing. Let them show up and find an empty vineyard and a locked gate. Watch the dream fall apart in real time. But something held me back. Not pity. Not guilt. Strategy. I wanted them to feel it. Not all at once, but piece by piece. Because I wasn't just going to cancel the wedding. I was going to show them exactly what it felt like to be treated like an afterthought, to be used, and to be dismissed by someone they never thought would fight back. The next move was mine. And I was going to make it count. The betrayal that pushed everything over the edge came exactly 13 days later. And it wasn't loud. It didn't arrive in some dramatic blow-up or screaming match. It came through an envelope, casually slid under my apartment door like it was nothing. I remember the moment vividly. It was early evening. I was finishing a client edit, headphones on, sipping from a chipped mug of black coffee that had long since gone cold. When I finally took a break and got up to stretch, I noticed it. An ivory envelope, expensive-looking, unmarked except for my name and sweeping cursive across the front. No return address. Inside was a thick, professionally printed wedding invitation. Gold foil details pressed into heavyweight paper. A custom watercolor of the Tuscan estate filled the inside flap. My estate. Their venue. The place they stole from me and assumed they could claim like it was theirs by birthright. But that wasn't what made me stop breathing for a second. It was the insert tucked into the envelope, a printed itinerary labeled family members' stay schedule. Each room in the estate had been assigned to a family member. Mom and Dad in the main suite, Aunt Cora and Uncle Leo in the garden cottage, cousins in the vineyard rooms, and Elise and her fiancé in the villa master. Of course, every single room was labeled except one. Mine. In fact, I wasn't listed anywhere. The bottom of the sheet had one final line: non-immediate guests and extended family are responsible for arranging their own accommodations off-property. I sat down, staring at it, my pulse a slow throb in my temples. Not only had they stolen my fund and used my own property for their fantasy wedding, they'd gone out of their way to exclude me from staying there. On the land I owned. In the estate I'd quietly restored and brought back to life with my own money and sweat. I flipped the invitation over, looking for some kind of message. A personal note. A card. Anything. And there it was. A small sticky note from my mother, written in her looping, condescending script, *Owen, we didn't include you in the villa accommodation since we figured you'd feel more comfortable staying in town with the other locals. You're always so independent, and we didn't want to make you feel obligated to attend every event. But of course, we'd love to see you at the ceremony. Love, Mom, asterisk. I reread it 3 times. The words blurred by the third. Independent. That's what they always said when they didn't want to bother treating me like family. It was the same line they used when I wasn't invited to Elise's graduation party, or when they forgot to get me a birthday gift because you're always so mature about those things. Translation: you don't matter enough to include, but you're still useful enough to exploit. A quiet kind of fury settled over me. Not the sharp, burning kind, but something heavier. Like iron. I took a photo of the note, saved the image in a folder I'd titled Receipts. Then I started making a list. I thought that would be it for the night. But fate wasn't done twisting the knife. Later that evening, just as I was settling into bed, my phone buzzed. A message from an old college friend I hadn't spoken to in nearly 2 years. Asterisk: hey man, weird question. Did you know Elise is telling people you offered to pay for the whole wedding? I ran into her at a cafe last week and she said you were bankrolling the dream like a proud little brother. Just thought I'd check since it didn't sound like you at all. Asterisk: I stared at the message, rereading it with a slow, growing nausea. She wasn't just using my fund. She was using me. My name. My reputation. My silence. Crafting a story where I was the generous sibling, funding her luxury fairy tale because I adored her that much. Framing it like I'd been part of the planning all along, happy to foot the bill. And people were eating it up. I checked her socials. She had made her Instagram public again. The top post was a carousel of wedding prep photos, dress fittings, menus, travel plans. And in the caption, none of this would be possible without the help of my amazing family, especially my brother Owen. Your support means the world to me. You've always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. Red heart, 1,200 likes. Dozens of comments. That's so sweet of him. You're lucky to have a brother like that. True sibling goals. I felt sick. She twisted the story into a public fairy tale where I was the silent benefactor, the cheerleader, the background character in her story. She was cashing in not just on my college fund, but on my identity. Turning my generosity into a trophy she could hold up for praise, basking in applause built on lies. That was the moment. The moment it all cracked. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. Something inside me clicked into place with terrifying clarity. It wasn't enough to just cancel the wedding and watch the chaos. That would be satisfying, sure. But it wouldn't teach them anything. It wouldn't make them feel the way I had felt for years. Erased. Ignored. Rewritten. No. They needed to experience it. The same betrayal, the same confusion, the same isolation. Only louder. I opened my computer and pulled up my contacts in Italy, the estate manager, the chef, the florist, the driver, the planner. I drafted a set of instructions for each. Subtle changes, delays, polite deflections. Nothing suspicious. Not yet. Then I opened my work calendar and blocked off the week of Elise's wedding. Because I wasn't going to show up. Not to the ceremony, not to the dinner, not even for the fake smiles and hollow hugs. No. I had other plans. Plans that were already in motion. And Elise had no idea that the dream she thought she built on stolen money, on stolen credit, was already starting to crack, quietly, from the inside. She wouldn't know what hit her. Not until it was far, far too late. The days that followed were quiet in the most deafening way. My phone, once constantly pinging with family requests or check-ins, usually about money, was eerily silent. After the public post Elise made, I thought more people would reach out, maybe to congratulate me, maybe to thank me. But no. Not one message. Not even from Mom, not even to fake concern or spin another excuse. It was like, in their minds, I had already played my part. Their version of the story was complete, and I wasn't needed anymore. And yet, I couldn't stop watching it all unfold. Each day, I'd open social media and scroll through Elisa's updates. Dress fittings at expensive boutiques, engagement brunches with place settings more extravagant than most weddings. Caption after caption, dripping with faux gratitude, so thankful to have such supportive family. Owen, you're the best. Smiling face with hearts, she tagged me in them, too. Publicly. Strategically. But it wasn't really about me. Not me. It was about the image of me. A generous brother with deep pockets and no voice. Someone they could parade around as the financial foundation of her dream life, while excluding me entirely from the actual events. I tried to brush it off, tried to focus on work, but the resentment ran deeper than I expected. Even though I was still operating my agency, even though deals were coming in, I found myself distracted, missing meetings, leaving client messages unread. The edits I used to do in a few hours now took days. I felt slow, unmotivated, like I'd been hollowed out by something I couldn't quite name. One night, around 2 a.m., I sat in the dark with a half-eaten dinner on the table, just rereading that stupid sticky note from my mother. The one about how I'd be more comfortable with the locals. The words echoed in my head like a mantra for how small they still saw me. How insignificant. I could build a business, buy a property on the other side of the world, and still be written out of the story like I was a footnote in their lives. I hadn't realized I was crying until a drop hit the note. I wiped it away quickly, angrily, like I was mad at myself for still hoping they'd treat me differently, for still wanting that inclusion, that basic recognition. I thought about calling my Aunt Na, the one who had set up my college trust in the first place. We hadn't talked in over a year, not since she moved upstate. But if anyone would understand, it was her. She'd never gotten along with Mom. Always said she spoiled Elise too much and ignored the warning signs. But I stopped myself. What would I even say? That the money she left for me had been funneled into a wedding I wasn't even invited to stay for? That her gesture had been twisted into another monument to Elisa's vanity? I didn't want her to feel the same way I did. So instead, I started walking late at night through the quiet streets of the neighborhood. No music. No destination. Just motion. I passed shuttered stores, flickering streetlights, the occasional couple stumbling out of a bar. No one noticed me. No one recognized me. And for some reason, that made me feel safe. Invisible, but safe. That week, I turned down all my new clients, paused all active contracts. I told them I was taking a short sabbatical and needed to recharge. They understood, most of them at least. I'd built enough goodwill over the years. But it was hard not to feel like I was unraveling. I wasn't just stepping back from work. I was pulling away from the version of myself I'd built to survive in that family. The giver. The fixer. The one who stayed quiet and steady while everyone else demanded more. It was my first time saying no without apologizing. And it felt horrible at first. Then, slowly, like a splinter being pulled, it started to feel necessary. During those long, silent nights, I found myself sketching ideas on a legal pad. Not just revenge, but rebuilding a different version of my business. More autonomous, less dependent on clients who thought I was always available. Passive income strategies. Licensing my portfolio. Partnering with travel brands instead of chasing down realtors who didn't respect deadlines. And then came the email. Subject line, final guest list confirmation, Villa de Lanma wedding event. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity got the better of me. It was from a coordinator in Italy. Elisa's planner had submitted the final names for the guest registry. There were 52 names. All family, all friends, even distant cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. But not me. Not one mention of my name. Not even as an optional guest. They were planning to stand on my property, eat food from my chef, drink wine from my cellar, and toast to a new life, all while pretending I didn't exist. It didn't sting this time. It burned. That was rock bottom. Not the betrayal itself. Not the money. Not even the exclusion. It was the realization that they'd only ever see me as a tool, a means to an end. Someone whose value ended the moment he stopped giving. And that was when I truly let go. I closed the email, shut my laptop, and grabbed my phone. I wasn't ready to make my move yet. Not quite. But I was ready to walk away from their story, from their narrative. And when the time came, I'd write my own ending. One they'd never forget. The first thing I did was take a deep breath. And then another. Not metaphorically, literally. Every morning before touching my phone or checking emails, I stood barefoot on the cold tile of my kitchen and inhaled, as if I could somehow pull a new version of myself into existence with each breath. It sounds small, but after years of being on call for a family that treated me like an ATM with a pulse, it felt revolutionary. I started by reclaiming my space, physically and mentally. I deleted the group chats, muted Elisa's socials, blocked Mom's number. Not out of spite, but necessity. There was no point leaving the door open for people who only knocked when they needed something. Then I called the estate manager in Tuscany. Her name was Sophia, and though we'd only exchanged formal messages in the past, this time I spoke with her directly. I told her I was going to be taking a more involved role in the weeks leading up to the wedding. I framed it as a quality control inspection for future clients, which wasn't entirely untrue. She was polite, professional, and surprisingly enthusiastic about my interest in the day-to-day operations. It would be an honor to have the owner finally visit, she said. We'll make sure the staff is ready to assist you personally. I thanked her, told her I'd send a revised itinerary soon, and then I went to work. Not revenge yet. Not yet. First, I focused on building something, on stabilizing myself. I pivoted my business model, just like I'd mapped out in those late-night sketches. Reached out to a few contacts in the travel and architecture space. Within weeks, I had a licensing deal to publish a digital portfolio showcasing luxury estates, mine included. The kicker? Each photo would include a short write-up crediting the owner and designer, Owen Waverley, founder of Canera Group. My inbox, once filled with last-minute photo reschedules and frantic calls from realtors, was now full of collaboration offers, speaking invites, and even one tentative email from a boutique travel magazine asking to do a feature piece titled "The Man Behind Tuscany's Hidden Gem." I said yes to all of it. The portfolio launched online a week later. It got shared by a few mid-tier influencers in the travel space. Then a real estate TikToker picked it up, marveling over how this quiet guy in his 20s just casually owns a vineyard in Italy. Overnight, my Instagram doubled in followers, then tripled. I hadn't even posted a picture of myself yet. People were just fascinated with the story of a young entrepreneur who apparently owned what they were calling the most romantic wedding estate in Europe. Elise had no idea. She still hadn't connected the dots. In her world, the villa was just some anonymous company-owned property managed by distant hands and online contracts. She was too wrapped up in cake samples and rehearsal dinners to notice the chessboard shifting underneath her feet. Meanwhile, I was no longer playing defense. I hired a legal advisor, Asha, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who immediately caught the scent of what my family had pulled. She reviewed the trust documents, flagged the clause that had been manipulated, and began quietly drafting a case to reclaim what was taken. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about boundaries. About principle. The kicker? The clause Elise and Mom had exploited was an outdated authorization loophole, based on verbal intent submitted to a sympathetic trustee. One quick hearing, one affidavit from me, and the entire paper trail would collapse. But I didn't move forward yet. Because I wasn't done rising. For the first time in years, I felt clear. Focused. I stopped second-guessing my decisions, stopped walking around with that constant buzzing guilt that came with denying my family anything. I worked longer hours, but it didn't feel like work. I took meetings from coffee shops overlooking the city. I read contracts with music playing softly in the background, not panic running through my veins. I even took a trip, not to Tuscany yet, but to Barcelona for a weekend conference where I spoke on a panel titled Building Wealth Quietly. I sat beside 30-somethings in blazers. And when the moderator asked me what inspired me, I smiled and said, silence. It teaches you who you are when no one else is looking. The crowd clapped. I didn't smile back, because in that moment, I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I was thinking about Elise. About how she was preparing to stand at the altar in a dress bought with stolen money, on land built from the sweat she never saw, in a dream that wasn't hers to begin with. And I realized something else. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about recognition. Not from them, but from me. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their validation. I had built something real, lasting, and powerful without a single ounce of their help. In fact, I'd built it despite them. But that didn't mean they got to walk away without consequences. Not after what they took, and certainly not after what they planned. So, when I returned home, I opened my laptop and drafted an email. Not to Elise. Not to Mom. But to Sophia, the estate manager. I outlined a subtle change in the itinerary. A shift in the schedule. Nothing major, just enough to introduce inconvenience. Then I called Asha. It's time, I said. She didn't ask for clarification. She just replied, let's make it count. And just like that, the final phase began. Quiet. Measured. But irreversible. Because I wasn't the background character in Elise's fairy tale anymore. I was the author, and I just picked up the pen. The email came on Thursday morning, buried between a brand sponsorship offer and a feature request from a startup luxury travel blog. At first, I almost missed it. The sender wasn't familiar, Martina Guttieri, executive planner, Bellinat Events. The subject line read, urgent, groom's family requesting major venue changes. Villa de Lanma. I blinked. Groom's family. I opened it. Dear Mr. Waverley, apologies for the direct message, but as the owner of Villa de Lanma, I wanted to inform you that the groom's parents, specifically Mrs. De Laurentiis, have contacted us directly to request significant alterations to the wedding itinerary. These include relocating the ceremony to the South Garden, which is under seasonal maintenance, replacing the chef's curated Italian menu with Texas-style barbecue, and requesting to bring in an outside decorator from Dallas who has not been approved by your team. We tried to explain that all plans must go through your office or the managing coordinator, but they claim to be close personal friends with the owner, referring to you as Elise's little brother. Please advise, I reread the line 3 times. Elise's little brother. So that was how she was introducing me now. Not by name. Not even with the courtesy of acknowledgement as the actual property owner. Just a label. A convenient tag in her curated world where I was a footnote. But beneath the insult was something far more interesting. The De Laurentiis family was meddling, boldly, which meant they had no idea what Elise hadn't told them. I responded to Martina promptly, thanking her for the heads up and CC'd Sophia to make sure nothing changed without my explicit written approval. I also added a line at the end, please do not inform the wedding party that I am in contact. I'll be visiting in person soon and I want to handle this discreetly. Because now it was time to go. I booked my flight that afternoon, first class, direct to Florence. No layovers, no distractions. I didn't tell anyone. Not my team. Not my aunt. Not even Asha, the lawyer. The next few days were a blur of preparations. I arranged to meet with the estate staff, had the security manager give me a full rundown of scheduled deliveries, and even walked the grounds via video chat with Sophia to confirm where every table, chair, lantern, and floral arch would be placed. She seemed impressed by my attention to detail. You must care about weddings a great deal, she said lightly. Not really, I replied. I just believe people should know who actually sets the stage they perform on. I arrived in Florence the week before the wedding, early enough to move unseen. I checked into a boutique hotel under a different name and began walking the estate grounds each day under the guise of an investor doing a property inspection. Everyone at the estate knew me, of course, but the wedding guests didn't. Not yet. Every morning I reviewed the event schedule. Every evening I made edits, but never big ones. Just pressure points. The florist, for example. I spoke with her and had her replace the requested color scheme, Elisa's obnoxious rose golden blush, with more traditional Tuscan whites and olive green, claiming the originals clashed with the villa's stonework. She hesitated, but when I reminded her who signed the final payment, she nodded. I trust your vision, she said. I smiled. So does my sister. She just doesn't know it yet. Then I called the chef. Enzo, a firecracker of a man in his 60s, had been with the estate for decades. He took one look at the De Laurentiis menu demands and said, "Barbecue ribs in my kitchen? They must be out of their minds." I'm inclined to agree, I told him. I'll make something real, he said. Something they'll remember, even if they don't understand it. Good, I told him. But let the menu stay the same on paper. Don't change anything until they're already seated. He gave a wicked grin. By midweek, I was deep in the logistics of what I'd started thinking of as a stage play. The players didn't know the script had changed. They were just rehearsing their lines, moving toward a climax they couldn't see coming. But then something unexpected happened. I found a weak spot. The day before the De Laurentiis family was set to arrive, I met with one of the junior planners, Luca, a quiet, meticulous guy who mostly handled transportation and guest coordination. We were reviewing shuttle schedules when he pulled out a clipboard and casually said, "We're still waiting on payment for the transportation upgrades." I blinked. Upgrades? The groom's family requested luxury vans for the guests instead of the standard fleet, but no one has processed the invoice. They didn't pay. They sent the request, but assumed it was comped. They mentioned that Owen already covered everything. I didn't speak for a moment. Then I said, "Can you send me a copy of the full invoice list? Everything billed under Elise or her fiancé's name?" He looked a bit nervous. "Should I loop in the planner?" "No," I said gently. "Just me. Discretion is important." He nodded and sent it. When I got back to my room and opened the file, my jaw clenched. There were nearly €12,000 worth of unapproved upgrades, rushed deliveries, and personalized additions. Elise and the De Laurentiises had simply tacked on without clearing any of it. Monogrammed napkins, imported dessert platters, a special champagne cart stocked with bottles I knew weren't in our cellar. All billed under the assumption that I would cover it without a word, without acknowledgement. That was the moment I made my decision. I wasn't just going to teach them a lesson. I was going to remind them of something they had long since forgotten. I built the stage. I funded the lights. I paid the cast. And now, they were going to see what happened when the curtain dropped and the real story finally began. I didn't sleep the night before the wedding. Not because I was nervous. Far from it. It was the kind of electric wakefulness you feel before pulling the last thread on a tightly wound knot. Everything had been prepared, scheduled, reviewed, and confirmed. Now all I had to do was wait. The morning sun over the Tuscan hills was blinding. A golden light spilled over the estate like a spotlight. And for a brief moment, the villa truly looked like something out of a dream. Elisa's dream. Built on lies and borrowed credit. Propped up by people she didn't even have the courtesy to acknowledge. I watched from a distance as the guests began to arrive. The groom's family descended in a flurry of designer luggage, statement sunglasses, and overperfumed air kisses. Mom and Dad rolled up in a rental SUV, wearing clothes that screamed, "We don't belong here, but we'll pretend we do." Elise followed shortly after, arriving last in a white silk robe, camera crew trailing behind her like she was filming the finale of a reality show. They looked happy. Entitled. Untouchable. But that's the thing about borrowed power. It never lasts. The first thread unraveled around noon. Sophia approached Elise gently during the pre-wedding brunch to inform her that the ceremony had been moved back by 2 hours due to an unexpected maintenance issue in the South Garden, the very location Elise insisted on after bulldozing the original plan. Elise was livid, of course. "What kind of maintenance? You knew this was my one request," she snapped. Sophia, calm and professional, simply said, "It's been an unusually rainy season. The ground isn't stable enough to support the platform or aisle runners. We'd hate for anyone to twist an ankle, especially the bride." It wasn't a lie, just a selective truth. The real issue? I'd instructed the groundskeepers to delay the stabilization process, knowing Elise would throw a tantrum if anything didn't go her way. Meanwhile, Enzo, the chef, was hard at work preparing his revised menu. When the first courses were served, ricotta stuffed squash blossoms, hand-rolled pappardelle pasta, and wild boar ragu, Elise's future mother-in-law sent her wineglass clinking angrily. "This isn't what we ordered," she hissed across the table. "Where are the brisket sliders? The pulled pork?" Elise looked pale, her lips twitching. I'll fix it," she mumbled and stormed into the kitchen. She didn't make it past the doorway. Enzo was waiting, arms crossed, face unmoved. "This is my kitchen," he said in slow, deliberate English. "You want barbecue? Go find a truck. This is Tuscany." He didn't even raise his voice. But Elise didn't go in. Instead, she returned to the table, sat stiffly, and forced a smile for the photographers while her mother-in-law glared daggers at her plate. The cracks were forming. Next came the transportation mix-up. The De Laurentiis family, having ignored every schedule sent to them, insisted on separate luxury vehicles to take them to the vineyard overlook for sunset portraits. But when the drivers arrived, they weren't Mercedes vans. They were basic estate shuttles. Clean, air-conditioned, but far from the glamorous image they were expecting. Mrs. De Laurentiis exploded. "I specifically said, no economy models. I will not be carted around like livestock." One of the drivers calmly handed her a copy of the unpaid invoice. "Upgrades were not confirmed, ma'am. These were the scheduled vehicles." She threw it to the ground and spun toward Elise, her voice dripping venom. "You told me your brother paid for everything." Elise faltered. "He did. I mean, mostly." Her fiancé looked at her sharply. "Wait. You told me Owen paid the entire balance. Is this not covered?" Elise looked like a deer in headlights. "I thought it was. He's always paid." The words rang out across the terrace, slicing through the murmurs of guests. I watched from a distance, sipping espresso on a shaded balcony where no one noticed me. Not yet. Later that evening, after the sun dipped below the hills and the ceremony finally began, 2 hours late, in a location Elise hadn't chosen, with guests visibly uncomfortable in the unshaded courtyard, I made my way down to the estate office. Sophia met me there. "They're seated," she said quietly. "Are you ready?" I nodded. She handed me a tablet connected to the estate's internal display system. The reception courtyard had a large mounted screen for slideshows and video messages, something Elise had insisted on for her Instagrammable moments. I tapped the screen twice. The slideshow began. At first, it showed the usual fare, childhood photos, engagement pictures, family vacations. Then the screen flickered, and a new slide appeared, the real sponsor behind this wedding. The room fell quiet. One by one, images faded in. Photos of me at the estate. Blueprints from the renovation. Press articles about my company. My name on the deed registry. A final slide read, *, this estate was not gifted. Not family-owned. It was built by Owen Waverley, paid in full, restored with care, and borrowed without permission for this wedding. *, the silence that followed was louder than any music Elise could have hired. I didn't need to be in the spotlight. I just wanted the truth to take its place. Gasps echoed, murmurs started, heads turned. Elise stood at the center of it all, frozen in her white gown, mouth parted, eyes wide. She looked at her fiancé, who stared at the screen with dawning comprehension. "You said your parents helped pay for this," he said, his voice low. He's my brother," she stammered. "Did you even ask him?" Elisa's hands dropped to her sides. I didn't wait to see more. I turned and walked quietly back toward the house, the night air cool against my skin, the weight in my chest lifting with each step. But that wasn't the final move. No, the best part was yet to come. Because when the clock struck midnight and the fairy lights twinkled in the trees and the guests were still reeling from what they'd seen, Sophia approached Elise with a final document. "Miss Waverley," she said, loud enough for the table to hear. "I just need your signature here before we can process the outstanding charges." Elise blinked. "What charges?" Sophia flipped the tablet toward her. "The ones you approved without payment? It's standard estate policy. Non-payment results in a lien against the booking party." The amount on the screen, €12,473.92. Elisa's hand trembled. And then, from the far corner of the table, my voice finally cut through the silence. "Don't worry," I said calmly, stepping into the light for the first time that night. "I'll cover it." Everyone turned. "But not as a gift," I continued, smiling just slightly. "As a loan. I'll be sending you a contract tomorrow with interest. We'll see how independent you really are." And then I walked away, past their stunned faces, past the string lights and champagne flutes, right back into the silence I had earned. The fallout was swift, humiliating, and entirely out of Elisa's control. The day after the wedding, the fairy tale veil lifted like fog burning under a harsh sun. The morning light did her no favors. Guests whispered behind breakfast mimosas. The groom's cousins packed early, and the De Laurentiis matriarch, once the loudest voice in every room, barely spoke above a hissed whisper, clearly furious that her family had been publicly embarrassed. Elise spent most of the morning locked in her villa suite, blinds drawn, trying to manage the damage control with one hand and wipe mascara trails with the other. I know this because Sophia kept me updated discreetly, not because I asked, but because by then the staff knew who I was, and more importantly, what I stood for. Her new husband, if he could still be called that, wasn't seen much after breakfast. Around midday, word spread that he'd checked into a hotel in Florence. No goodbye. No explanation. Just gone. And Mom? She tried to spin it. Texted me some awkward attempt at guilt-laced reconciliation. "I think you overreacted. We're still family. This wasn't how it was supposed to go." I didn't respond. Then came the final blow. The trust fund, my college money they drained, was officially challenged in court. Asha, my attorney, presented the trustee with evidence of unauthorized manipulation, the forged verbal consent, and the false beneficiary transfer. It wasn't even a fight. The trustee folded like wet paper. Within weeks, the court ruled in my favor. The original trust was reinstated with penalties. Elise was ordered to repay every euro taken, plus interest. Mom and Dad had to co-sign the payment plan. Apparently, they hadn't realized Elise had spent more than what was even in the trust. Her wedding wasn't just stolen. It was definanced. The estate, of course, never hosted another Waverley event again. I gave Sophia strict instructions: if anyone from my family calls, tell them the venue is permanently booked. And it was. Not just booked, rebranded. A few months later, Villa de Lanma became the flagship property of a new travel and photography experience I launched called Owned by Quiet. A curated line of luxury estates rebuilt by people no one believed in. Photographers, writers, immigrants, quiet kids who were always told to sit down and stay small. The business took off. My name was no longer hidden in legal records. It was on the brochure. As for Elise, I haven't heard much. Her social media went dark not long after the wedding debacle. Occasionally, a friend of a friend will mention she's working part-time at some boutique in the city, trying to pick up the pieces. Mom still sends texts on holidays, still signs off with, "Love you always." She never mentions the wedding. Never mentions the debt. Never asks how I am. And I'm okay with that. Because in the end, I got exactly what I wanted. Not just revenge, but something cleaner, deeper. I got peace. And they got to learn, in full view of everyone, what it feels like to treat the quiet one like a background character, only to realize he was the author all along. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever had a moment where you realized you needed to write your own ending? Tell me what you think, I really want to know in the comments below.